First, live, local. This is Fox 12 Now.
Hello everyone, this is Fox 12 Now. I'm Greg Nibbler. Thank you for joining us. Just want to pull that up right away. That is our live look there from our ski bowl camera, taking a look at Mount Hood, and it looks pretty nice out there right now. I mean, a little bit of cloud cover up there, but still looking pretty great for this Friday, and thank you for joining us. We are live here every weekday starting around 1 p.m. Pacific, going throughout the afternoon, covering a wide range of topics. And now, speaking of topics, we're going to be talking about climate change, and in particular, the thoughts that people in Oregon and Washington have about it. There's a poll out, and we are joined now by John Horvick from DHM Research to talk about the results of this. And John, it's always great to have you here on the show. And for anybody who maybe this is their first time joining where we talk about some of these statistics, would you mind letting them know just a little bit about DHM Research and how you go about researching these polls and surveys that you have?
Sure. DHM Research, we're a nonpartisan, independent public opinion and policy firm. So we're pollsters. And we like to say that as a pollster, our job is to ask people what sort of communities they want to live in. We regularly do our own research. We have clients, of course, but we regularly do our own research where we go ask, in this case, Oregonians and Washington residents, but any number of issues. And so these were two surveys, one in Oregon, one in Washington, that asked some similar questions. In both surveys, we talked to 500 people in both states, so 1,000 overall. And we work real hard to get samples that are representative of the community, or the state. So by geography, by age, by political identification, all those different things to have a group of people who truly represent Oregon and truly represent Washington.
Yeah, all over the board. So, every kind of demographic being represented and covered in these, and that's why it's always great to really get that idea of what the full picture of, and what's taking a look at data. What are people saying? And when it comes to climate change, so how was it that you approached this?
Well, we regularly, climate change is a big issue. Environmental issues are important. Touches on everything from the air we breathe to the economy. So we're regularly asking folks about it. We do it a lot of different ways. We're going to look at some specific questions today, but before we look at the specific questions, I'll just say one thing we regularly do in our surveys is to just ask people, hey, what's the most important problem facing Oregon or Washington today? And we ask that open-ended where people can say anything that they want. And so we're really trying to think, like, in a question like that, what are the top of mind issues, what's really pressing or salient for folks? Right now, the things that people are saying have to do with homelessness and crime, cost of living, housing, issues that surround that. Climate change rarely comes up. It can be 2, 3, 4% maybe of the comments are around climate change. That's, if you look at questions similarly nationally, it's also 1, 2, 3% of people will out of the gate say it's the most important problem here in Oregon or Washington or in America. So it gets a lot of attention. I'm not trying to say it's not important, but it is, climate change right now isn't as pressing or top of mind of other folks, of other issues. Now, we also will ask people specific issues. So we might ask them directly about homelessness or housing or the economy or roads and transportation, whatever it might be. And when we ask people directly, are you concerned about climate change? You will get 60%, 65% of folks in the Pacific Northwest telling us that that's a concern. A clear majority, but it also tends to be well below when we ask directly about housing or homelessness or cost of living issues. And so most people are concerned. It's not a top of mind issue for most folks, and they are not telling us it's the most important thing. It's a thing that's important, but not so much as everything else. And then when we ask about climate change, sometimes we're wondering, what are people thinking when we ask about climate change? And here's a question that tries to get at that a little bit. So if you look at the data there, because people can say that, people can say that the climate is changing, but that doesn't tell us everything about why they might think that the climate is changing. And there's some really important differences. So here's a question that we've been tracking for a while. These are some data from this summer, so just in the last couple months, where first people could tell us whether the climate was changing or that the Earth was warming or not, and then if they could tell us why. So about 80% of those in Oregon and Washington said that the climate is warming, but just about half said it's primarily due to human activity. And I do think when advocates or the media or whomever talk about
Right.
climate change, I think they usually are implying, or people are supposed to infer that it's about human activity, it's about carbon emissions, it's about methane emissions. But even in the Pacific Northwest, even in liberal Pacific Northwest, environmentally minded Pacific Northwest, it's just about half of folks think that the climate is warming because of human activity.
That's a little bit surprising to me, and I've kind of assumed, yeah, that would be a lot higher than
Yeah.
50% on that. But that is pretty interesting. And this, again, as you mentioned too, this is Northwest,
Yep.
but you take a poll of a wide range of demographics, so there's a lot of different people that are a part of this. But that is a surprising result of this, I've got to say.
We can also look at these data and say, yeah, people recognize, and people have been living through our summers for the last year, experienced wildfires, whatever it might be, and say, yeah, but things are getting hotter. But that doesn't mean everybody think it's driven by human activity or carbon emissions or things of that sort. It could be other things, natural variation, for example.
Yeah,
So,
but with 80% definitely acknowledging it. I mean, as you mentioned, just people have their opinions on all this, but I mean, fires, temperature data seems to indicate that things are warmer.
So a question I get from my clients a lot then, or the community or media folks is, well, if not that many people say that climate change is the most important problem, or if you ask about climate change and other issues, people recognize that other issues or I'd say other issues are a higher level of concern for them. Why is it so focused or central to our politics? And there's a pretty good reason for that. And that's because the difference in attitudes by political party are so stark. And if you look at this question here, this is just for everybody. This is for the average of all Oregonians and all Washingtonians. But if you break it out by political party, you really see what's going to drive the electoral politics, the legislative politics, the elections in the two states. So there are different ways we could ask this question. They kind of all have the same pattern of responses, but here we see that 79% of Democrats say that the Earth is warming, and it's primarily because of human activity, compared to 23% of Republicans.
Wow.
So if you have, in Oregon and Washington, because these tend to be Democratic states, left-leaning states, these are really the types of voters that can get these Democrats elected, and that Democratic elected officials have to be responsive to. And Democratic voters, although they might not represent the majority in either state, they're so committed to their positions on it that it really does drive electoral politics.
Wow. And just seeing this right here, these stark differences. I'm curious, and you may not have this data, so I'm just kind of throwing this out there, but how has climate change ranking as far as the concern for everyone, how has that changed over the last few years? Was that a much higher concern 5 years ago, and now it's just been overtaken by some of these other issues you mentioned, housing prices, homelessness, all of that?
It's been relatively stable if we sort of zoom back. Like, there haven't been huge, big lifts or declines in concern. We do tend to see, and this is on all sorts of issues, this isn't just climate change, but we do tend to see sort of this push and pull by change in the presidency. So when Donald Trump was president, and he had one particular way of talking about climate, advocating for policies around the environment or energy or whatever it might be. And also, Democrats were really sort of riled up against him. We saw advocacy organizations, Democratic voters, elevate climate as a concern, an organizing force. And it's not that I don't think concerns declined, really. I mean, people are still concerned about climate change. If you were concerned in 2018, you're concerned in 2024. But because we don't have that sort of push and pull from a Republican in office in the White House, Democrats aren't quite as motivated around that. So I would actually expect, say, if Donald Trump wins in 2024 in November, I would expect sort of left-leaning, progressive, environmentally minded folks to be more concerned, show more organization around that, and actually less if a Democrat wins. That's a pattern we tend to see on any number of issues, where when one side takes a position, the other side kind of has an equal and opposite force. But sort of big picture, it's been more stable than not, but I'd say concern has declined a little bit these last few years, and I think it's in part because of who's been in the White House.
That does make a lot of sense. If you're not hearing a lot of stuff that goes against that belief, then naturally you're not going to have the other side
Yep.
maybe, going as much. And a lot will be determined, I figure, in November as far as how those opinions could ramp up, just as you were saying, depending on who is in the White House and who's going to be out there leading the way. Well, this is definitely interesting, data though to see, because the most shocking thing I think to me was that 50% believe it's actually climate change, not human or human related. The other half not. So that split right there, that's pretty interesting. Anything else that you think is that you can take away from this that was maybe surprising?
Yeah, it's not in these data. We have it in other places, just don't have charts for it. But those who with more education, in particular, are more concerned about climate change. Climate change tends to be an issue that folks with college degrees prioritize more than those without college degrees. And if you think about people who are elected office, who are in positions of influence, whether it's at a business or in government or foundations, those are folks who tend to always have, not always, but primarily, these are people with college degrees. And so if you think of people in leadership, people with education, higher levels of education, they tend to think more that climate change is important. And that's another reason why climate is maybe more center of our politics than you might think, just looking at public opinion data on average, because it's very partisan and it's driven by concerns about those with higher education. And those folks tend to be in positions of power.
Well, John, for everybody out there who wants to follow along with this data too and read this one and some of these other polls and surveys, I mean, there's mountains of data and information that people can find, but what's the best place for them to do that?
Go to our website, dhmresearch.com. You'll find a link on there for insights. We have these data here. We have all the breakdowns with the crosstabs, so you can look at all the results by age, gender, education, anything you're interested in. It's all there for you. Yeah,
there's a lot of them. I can assure you. You'll find something that you're going to be really interested in on there. I have spent a lot of time scrolling through all of those. Like, I didn't even think about this. Now I want to know how people feel about it. So lots of great stuff on there. John, thank you so much, as always, for joining us here on Fox 12 Now.
Pleasure.
And for everybody watching, this is Fox 12 Now. So if this is your first time tuning in, we are here every weekday. It is Friday. We've got a lot coming up for you today. Anytime between 1 p.m. and 4 p.m. we could be on, and we're going to be on quite a bit this afternoon. So switching gears, though, we cover a wide range of topics. Earlier today, I went out to check out Major League Table Tennis. There is a Major League for Table Tennis. They are actually here in Portland this weekend, and I got to talk to one of the members of the Portland team, the Portland Paddlers. And so we're going to be playing that coming up at 1:30. We've got the Fox 12 Weather Podcast, video edition. We're going to be talking to a charity organization that has created these really amazing mobility chairs for people to get out onto the beach and go onto hiking trails that maybe wouldn't be able to beforehand. So lots of stuff. You can find all of our segments and shows at Fox 12 Oregon's YouTube channel, at kptv.com, under the Fox 12 Now tab, or of course on the Fox 12 Oregon app. Thank you for joining us. We're going to regroup. I'll talk to you here in about 15 minutes. I'm Greg Nibbler. This is Fox 12 Now.